You've been told that overeating is a lack of willpower, a modern problem, a personal failing, a weakness of character that better, more disciplined people simply don't have. That is wrong. It is unfair. And by the end of this video, I think you'll understand exactly why. Because the urge to keep eating when food is rich and plentiful, the drive to gorge on something delicious even after your body has technically had enough, is not a defect in you. It is a survival strategy older than our species, running perfectly in a world it was never designed for. I want to be careful and kind with this one, because food and our relationship with it is something almost everyone carries some quiet struggle about. So let me say clearly right at the start, this is not a video about what you should eat or how much or a lecture about any of that. This is a history video. A story about where a very deep, very human instinct came from and why it feels the way it feels. Because I think understanding it, really understanding it, is a kind of relief. It takes something you might feel ashamed of and shows you it for what it actually is, not a flaw. An inheritance. Here is the thing nobody tells you about overeating. For almost the entire history of our species, it was not a problem. It was the answer. It was one of the smartest things a human being could possibly do. The instinct that torments people in the modern world was, for hundreds of thousands of years, a life-saving superpower. And to understand that, you have to leave the world you know completely behind and step into the world your body still thinks it lives in. So let's go there. Let's talk about the world that built your appetite. For the vast, vast majority of human existence, there were no supermarkets, no refrigerators, no pantries stocked with a week's worth of meals, no reliable way for most of our history to store food against the future at all. Food was not a given. Food was the central, desperate daily problem of being alive. And crucially, it was wildly unpredictable. A successful hunt might bring a mountain of meat one day, and then nothing for days, sometimes weeks. A patch of ripe fruit might be a feast for an afternoon, and then gone. Our ancestors lived in a world of feast and famine, swinging constantly between the two, never knowing when the next meal, let alone the next feast, would come. Now put yourself in that world and think about what the smartest possible behavior actually is. You've had a run of lean days, everyone's hungry, and then suddenly abundance. Your band brings down a large animal, or stumbles onto a tree heavy with ripe fruit, or finds a bounty of honey. There is, for this brief, precious window, more food than you need in this exact moment. What should you do? The modern answer, eat a sensible portion and save the rest, was very often not available. There was no saving the rest. The meat would rot. The fruit would spoil or be taken by animals. The abundance in front of you was not going to keep. It existed only right now. So the genuinely intelligent thing to do, the thing that kept your ancestors alive, was to eat well past the point of being full, to pack in as much of that precious, unpredictable energy as your body could possibly hold while it was there to be had, because the only safe place to store it, the only reliable pantry available, was on your own body. Think about that. Your body is the pantry. In a world with no other way to save food for later, the fat your body laid down after a feast was not a problem. It was a savings account. It was survival insurance, energy banked against the lean days that were absolutely certainly coming. The ancestor who ate modestly and left food on the carcass out of restraint and then starved a week later did not pass on their genes. The ancestor who gorged when they could, who felt a deep, driving pleasure in packing away that rare abundance, who carried a little extra energy into the hard times, was more likely to survive and to feed their children through the famine. And so that instinct, that drive, that pleasure got passed down to you. And I want you to really sit with how relentless that pressure was over how much time, because it explains why the instinct is so deep and so hard to override. This wasn't a rule that applied now and then. This was the central fact of existence for our ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years, across 10,000 generations and more. Famine wasn't a rare disaster. It was a regular visitor, a season, a near certainty that came around again and again. Every single one of your direct ancestors, without exception, lived through it, survived it, and reproduced, or you would not be here. Which means you are descended exclusively from the champions of the feast, from the ones whose bodies were best at grabbing energy when it appeared and holding onto it when it didn't. Not one of your ancestors was someone who couldn't manage that. Every one of them won that particular contest over and over for an unimaginable stretch of time. You are the product of the most successful overeaters and energy hoarders who ever lived. That is not an insult. That is your inheritance, and it is the reason you survived to be born. That is the whole secret. The pleasure of the feast is not random, and it is not a moral weakness. It is the reward your brain evolved to give you for doing the single most important thing you could do in a world of scarcity. Eat up while you can. So now let's talk about what your body learned to hunt for, because it is beautifully specific and it explains a lot about what tempts you today. Your ancestors' brains became finely tuned to seek out exactly the foods that offered the most survival value, the biggest energy payoff, the rarest and most crucial nutrients. And what were those? Think about what is hardest to find in the wild and most valuable when you do: sweetness. In nature, a sweet taste meant ripe fruit or honey, a concentrated, precious burst of energy that was rare and fleeting, fat-rich, calorie-dense, the ultimate long-term fuel, hard to come by and enormously valuable, and salt, essential for the body and genuinely scarce in many ancient environments. Sweet, fat, salt. Read that list again because you already know it. Those are not random cravings. Those are the flavors your body evolved to chase because in the ancient world, they were the rarest and most valuable signals of survival on the menu. When you feel an almost irresistible pull towards something sweet or rich or salty, you are not being greedy. You are running a 100,000-year-old search program, one that was written when those exact tastes meant the difference between thriving and dying. Your tongue is an ancient instrument calibrated for a world of scarcity. It is doing its job perfectly. The world just changed the rules, and there is a whole reward system in your brain built to enforce this, which is worth understanding because it is the engine under everything. When you eat those rare, valuable foods, your brain releases a surge of feel-good signaling, a chemical reward that says, in effect, yes, do that again, remember where you found it. This is the same basic machinery that drives all sorts of powerful motivations, and evolution wired it to fire hard for exactly the foods that kept you alive. It is not a coincidence that a bite of something rich and sweet can feel almost blissful. That bliss is ancient programming, a reward carefully calibrated to make sure you never passed up precious energy when you found it. In a world of scarcity, a brain that made feasting feel that good was a brain that survived. The pleasure wasn't a bonus. It was the whole mechanism. It was evolution's way of steering your ancestors toward the thing that would keep them breathing. And that same reward circuit, unchanged, is still firing inside you every time you taste something your ancient body classifies as treasure. And this drive to feast is not unique to us, which tells us how deep it runs. All across the animal kingdom, creatures that live with unpredictable food supplies show the same behavior. Gorge when there is plenty, because there might be nothing later. A bear before winter. A predator after a kill, eating enormously because it doesn't know when it'll eat again. The feast instinct is ancient, and it is wired deep into far more than just us. When our ancestors gorged at the kill, they were doing something life itself had been doing for a very long time. They were just doing it with a human brain that could also uniquely savor it, turn it into celebration, into meaning, into joy. And that human twist matters because it may be where some of our deepest social traditions were born. Think about how many of humanity's most important moments are built around a feast. The wedding, the harvest festival, the funeral meal, the holiday table groaning with far more food than anyone needs. That is not a coincidence, and it is not modern excess. It reaches straight back to those ancient windows of abundance, when a rare surplus of food was one of the few times a whole group could gather, relax, and eat their fill together. The feast became bound up with togetherness, with survival, with the sheer relief of a full belly shared among people you love. To this day, when we want to mark something as important, we do it with a shared meal, an abundance of food, everyone eating more than usual. We are, in those moments, performing one of the oldest rituals our species has, the celebration of the feast, the ancient joy of plenty after want. Overeating together at the great moments of life may be one of the most deeply human things we ever do. So let me throw something at you that might sound wild, but is the key that unlocks this entire mystery. Nothing has gone wrong with your instincts. Nothing. The instinct that drives modern overeating is not broken. It is working absolutely perfectly. The problem isn't the instinct. The problem is that the world it was designed for has vanished in the blink of an evolutionary eye and been replaced by a world that instinct has no idea how to handle. Scientists call this an evolutionary mismatch. And it is one of the most important ideas for understanding modern human life. Here's what it means. Your body and its instincts were shaped over hundreds of thousands of years, buy-in for a specific environment, a world of scarcity, unpredictability, and hard-won food. But that environment has changed faster than evolution could possibly keep up in a stunningly short span of time. Historically speaking, we went from a world where food was scarce and unpredictable to a world, for many people, of endless, cheap, reliable abundance. Food that never runs out. Food available every hour of every day, on every corner, with no effort and no risk. And here is the tragedy hidden in that triumph. Your ancient instinct did not get the update. It is still running the old program. It still believes, deep down, that this abundance is a rare and fleeting feast that could vanish tomorrow. It still whispers the ancient command that once saved your life. Eat up while you can, because who knows about tomorrow, but tomorrow the food is still there. And the day after, and the day after that, the feast never ends now. And an instinct built for a feast that always ended is left screaming its old advice into a world where it no longer makes any sense at all. That is not your weakness. That is a mismatch between a 100,000-year-old body and a world that is only decades old. And this idea, evolutionary mismatch, explains so much more than appetite once you see it. It is the same reason we crave rest and comfort so powerfully, back when conserving energy mattered, and now when we mostly sit. It is part of why sugar tastes like heaven and exercise feels like a chore, when for our ancestors, movement was unavoidable and sugar was a rare miracle. Over and over the same pattern. An instinct that was perfectly brilliantly tuned to an ancient world, now firing in a modern one that has flipped the old rules on their head. We are, all of us, Stone Age bodies walking around in a world we built far too fast for our own biology to follow. Your appetite is just the clearest, most personal example of a mismatch that runs through the whole of modern human life. Once you see it in one place, you start seeing it everywhere. And there is something freeing in that because it means the struggle was never a personal failing. It was baked in the moment our world outran our biology. Now we have to talk about the part that makes this genuinely hard, because it is not just that food is abundant now. Something more deliberate has happened. Here is the uncomfortable part. Modern food, a lot of it is not simply the natural abundance our ancestors would have recognized. Much of it has been carefully, deliberately engineered to hijack these exact ancient instincts. Think about it. Your brain evolved to find sweet, fat, and salt intensely rewarding because they were rare and valuable. So what happens when an entire industry figures that out and starts designing foods that combine sugar, fat, and salt in concentrations that essentially never occur in nature? You get food engineered to hit your ancient reward system harder than anything your ancestors ever encountered. Food specifically built to be nearly impossible to stop eating. This is sometimes called hyper-palatable food, and it is, in a real sense, a key cut precisely to fit a lock evolution installed in you. So the deck is genuinely stacked. You are walking through a world of endless food, much of it deliberately designed to exploit a survival instinct that is tens of thousands of years old, an instinct that is doing exactly what it evolved to do. And then, on top of all of that, people are told that if they struggle, it is simply a failure of their own willpower. Can you see how unfair that is? It is like installing a fire alarm, filling the room with smoke on purpose, and then blaming the alarm for going off. The instinct isn't the problem. The instinct is behaving exactly as designed. It is the mismatch and what some have built to exploit it that makes it so hard. And because this is real, and because it genuinely affects so many people's lives and health and happiness, I want to say one honest thing before we go on. If your relationship with food is something you struggle with, please know there is no shame in it whatsoever, and none of this is a moral judgment on you. You are wrestling with one of the oldest and most powerful instincts our species has, in an environment ruthlessly designed to trigger it. That is genuinely hard, and it is not a character flaw. If it is something that weighs on you, talking to a doctor or a qualified professional, someone who can offer real, personal, compassionate support is one of the smartest and kindest things you can do for yourself. I'll leave that there sincerely. So when did humans first overeat for pleasure? And here is the honest answer, the one this channel always owes you. We can never know the first feast. There is no fossil of a full belly, no artifact of the first time a human ate for the sheer joy of it, and not just to survive. That first pleasurable feast, whenever it was, left nothing behind for us to find. Anyone who gives you a precise date is guessing. But here is what we can say, and it reframes the whole question in a way I find genuinely comforting. The urge to overeat for pleasure isn't a recent development that appeared with modern food. It is almost certainly as old as our species, and older because the instinct is the pleasure, the drive to gorge on rare abundance, and the deep enjoyment of doing it are the same thing, two faces of one ancient adaptation. Our ancestors didn't overeat grimly as a chore. Evolution made it feel wonderful because feeling wonderful is exactly what motivated them to do the survival critical thing. So the first human who ever felt pure joy packing away a rare feast was doing something so old it predates humanity itself. The pleasure was never separate from the survival. The pleasure was the survival wearing its happiest face. Because that is the part I want to leave you with. The next time you feel that pull, that drive to keep eating something delicious past the point of need, I don't want you to feel shame. I want you to feel something closer to awe and maybe a little compassion for yourself, because what you're feeling is not a modern weakness. It is a 100,000-year-old survival instinct, one that carried your ancestors through ice ages and famines and unimaginable hardship, one that is the entire reason you are alive to feel it at all. It is doing its ancient job with perfect, tragic loyalty in a world that no longer needs it to. That instinct is not your enemy. It is a very old friend, one that saved your family for 1,000 generations, and simply hasn't understood yet that the famine isn't coming anymore. Understanding that doesn't magically make the pull disappear, but it does change what it means. It turns a source of shame into a piece of your own deep history. It lets you look at the feeling with clear eyes and say, I know what you are. I know where you came from, and I know you were only ever trying to keep me alive. They didn't overeat because they were weak. They feasted because they were smart and because their bodies rewarded them for surviving, and you inherited all of it, the drive and the joy and the ancient wisdom, from people who needed it to see another spring. So here is my question for you. Now that you can see the urge to feast as an ancient survival gift rather than a personal failing, does it change how you feel about it? I'm genuinely curious how that lands for you. Let me know in the comments. Until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.